welcome back to the Talent Table with Alaina and Christie. This week, we're going to remix the topics just a bit. I know that you were anticipating us talking about resume hacks and tips, but we did ask our audience to engage with us, the ones that are tuning in and listening, and you wanted to bring some topics to the table. So the topic that has stood out to us is, how do you transition into HR? Christie and I both have come from non-traditional careers that tend to lead into a typical HR path or career. So we wanted to talk a little bit about our journey with you and some potential tips and strategies that you can utilize to move into HR. So first of all, hi, Christie, how are you?
Hi, Alaina. I'm doing good. Glad to be back this week.
Yes, awesome, awesome. So for our remix topic today, transitioning into HR, we have talked about this just a little bit. And to be honest, getting into HR, it can be a bit challenging. It's not easy. I feel like sometimes it's like the Oz behind the curtain, like trying to break into HR. You don't
hmm
necessarily know a lot of times what the HR function does. You don't know how far and wide or how complex the opportunities are, or what's available, or what the skill set is you need to get into HR. So I'm definitely excited to dig into this topic today. But I guess first I want to turn it to you. You've had a unique path into HR. Can you share a little bit about your path and how did you make your transition?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty interesting that you mentioned like the Oz behind the curtain because I think that my path into HR was kind of a combination of good luck and hard work. Kind of have a non-traditional background. It took me a little bit of time to get through college and worked full time in some different jobs outside of the organization that I'm in right now. And I actually worked in fundraising and development, public relations prior to coming to this organization. And I think that really helped to build up some of those skills that you would need for recruiting, because fundraising is all about getting people connected to a cause and asking them for money, and very, very much similar to recruiting in a different way. And I think the good luck probably comes into play with some of the great leaders that I've been privileged to work for that were really focused on development. And so um, just coupling my hard work and being driven to try new things and to excel in my career, and coupled with the supervisors that have helped me with my development path, really gave me the right opportunities so that I could build the experiences that then I could lean on when I was going to interview for HR roles, because then I had those examples I could point back to. So I think like development opportunities are huge. Making the relationships and the networking is huge too, when you're trying to break into HR. Alaina, I know you have a different background too. So how did you make that transition from retail into HR?
Yes. So it seems to align, but then it doesn't in a sense. So in my retail experience, I was in different types of roles, like second line, third line leadership. So a lot of my experience was in talent development. Some things that people may not have known. So like myself, if I was a recruiter looking to recruit me, you may not know some of the things that we do. So it was important, like you said, really making those partnerships, being available for those developmental opportunities, but also really starting to write my story. So transitioning from retail was hard. It took a very vested effort to make the transition. I would say first, I wanted to identify what my knowledge gaps were, or what my experience gaps were. So being in a management role, automatically thought, oh, I could be an HR manager at, some organization. Well, when I started doing my research, the first thing I did was I started looking at some of these outside organizations where they had talent acquisition managers, HR managers, things of that nature. And I really had to do some self-discovery and figure out, okay, what are these knowledge gaps, experience gaps that I'm having? Yes, I have a decade of leadership experience. I've worked all over doing different types of projects, but how can I utilize those transitional skills to really align with those roles and responsibilities they're looking for in these jobs? So when I did a hard look, I started thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not really ready, or as far as experience align, to take on one of these HR manager roles, right? And we'll kind of get to more about the education piece. I can talk about that in a little bit, but I think I am aligned with some of these professional technical roles. So I really had to, once I did my research, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to take a step back to take a step forward. So when I started looking at that, that's how I got aligned with recruiting, because I was like, you know what, this seems to align with a lot of the hiring that I have been doing in my current role as a retail manager. I've been doing a lot of talent development, managing managers and supervisors, helping them make hiring decisions. So a lot of consultation on the hiring perspective. Because I did also think about maybe going into the other part of HR, because we did do a lot of investigations and benefits and things of that nature. But the thing that I was most passionate about was going to be aligning people with great opportunities and also the flexibility. I wanted a better work-life balance, and I feel like recruiting from the people that I interviewed, because I interviewed people in those recruiting roles learn more about that opportunity. That seemed to align with what I was looking for. So, long story short, I did my research and I came up with a plan and a strategy that was going to allow me to align the transferable skills I had to some facet of HR, right? I wasn't going to be able to transfer from a manager to a manager because I was like, don't have that. So, but I was like, the recruiting piece, I could do that. I really didn't want to do like benefits and payroll and compensation because there are routes into that space as well. But I thought recruiting was really going to be the catalyst I needed to get into HR, step my foot into the door, and then, take it from there and run.
Yeah, I think that that's really good. And I'm glad that you pointed back to evaluating your strengths and weaknesses against what you were looking for, because oftentimes people see, I'm a manager today, I can be a manager, in any role. So I think that that is really good to have that honest, self-reflection on what roles you would be competitive for.
Yes, absolutely. So, and another thing is that when you go out there and you start getting advice, like, people reach out and like, oh, I could get these certifications and things of that nature. Well, no, you can't. There's some certifications you will not be able to get into HR. The best thing you can do to get started is to get some business experience. I feel that's the first thing. You want to come with some business experience to HR, because like you said, in that interview setting, you're going to want to rely on some of those situations that you've been in for that interview. So a part of my strategy, my plan was also raising my hand for opportunities. So if there was a remodel that was going on, I'd raise my hand for that. If there was a store with low engagement scores for their employees, I'd raise my hand for that. I'd want to get in some situations that I was uncomfortable with to develop myself so that I was aligned with new opportunities. To have those stories to lean on, I think is super important. So you're going to have to get a little uncomfortable if you want to go into uncharted territory per se.
Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So moving forward, so did you get any additional certifications? I got my MBA because when people are telling me, oh, go get your HR certification. Well, you can't get some of these HR certifications without having HR experience per se, and they're pretty picky on what those roles look like. There are some certifications that you can get as a beginner to HR. But for myself and what I would recommend on the recruiting perspective, looking back, there are some really great recruiting certifications that you could get if you're aligned with the recruiting space. But for a generalist role, I think there's the APHR that you can get, and I'll put the links in the comments. But as far as education or certifications, did you do anything like that to be more competitive?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I've been soul searching a lot about development professionally lately. And so I did get my PHR last year. It wasn't a requirement, and it's more of an HR generalist kind of focus rather than just recruiting. The interesting part about the PHR is that it gives you a really huge, broad, overarching kind of view of different aspects of recruiting, or I'm sorry, HR, that you might not always have experience with depending on what your organization's focused on. But I think that gives you a good base knowledge of different roles across HR. I was lucky my organization paid for that certification and then some of the study materials. So I think if anybody is going to go that route, make sure you research with your organization to see if they would, help reimburse some of those expenses. The other thing, and you mentioned the MBA, the advanced degree is not required, at least where we work, for HR. But I do think there's a lot of value in the MBA because you get some holistic business acumen, right? And then some situational and scenario experience and working through those different experiences that then you could apply to your roles. But I don't think that there's any certain one designation that I think is more important than another. I think you really need to do some soul searching and decide like what's most important to you. What are your career goals? How much time do you want to invest in something like that, and money too, because a lot of times those educational activities do cost money. If your organization doesn't reimburse, then really have to weigh the value of it. um, I don't know, Alaina, have you done anything aside from that MBA or done any research on designations yourself?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm currently, my 2021 goals is to finally finish my SPHR. So I'm putting it out there. So you
Good
all are
for
my
you.
accountability partners now. So definitely, but transitioning. So some of the requirements I wasn't able to capitalize on to get into HR, but so I did get my MBA. That was kind of a goal, personal goal for myself, because I was kind of on the fence, like, okay, so I'm going to try to get into HR. I'm going to make these, different sacrifices and different things to try to make it happen. But on the other side of it, if I'm not able to make that transition, I have my MBA because a lot of my senior leadership in my current role in my current career has an MBA, and I'll be able to leverage it either way. So that was a personal decision for me. Was it required for my job? No. Did it make me more competitive? Potentially, because a big part about breaking into HR is really knowing your business. So you want to know the business side, and you want to be able to speak to that because, we're dealing with the human capital piece. We're dealing with how do we align people with our business model. So I think that the MBA was great to have to really get like you said, a holistic perception of what business operation looks like, what that management perspective looks like, and I was able to leverage it some as I was competing for opportunities. But one thing I will say, I think, is probably more important. So you don't want, we're not out there saying, oh, you have to go spend all this money to get all these certifications. But what I would say is the networking piece. I think for me, that was probably more dynamic. I know you said you made some mentorship partnerships and leveraged some development partners, but for me, it was networking. So how I got in my current role is I networked. I told everyone, I had no shame. I was like, I'm looking for a job. I'm looking for a way out of retail. I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. Who do you know? Who can I talk to? So that's what I did. I leveraged my personal network. I leveraged my professional network. And this is before I was even heavy on LinkedIn, right? So I was out there hitting the street, honey, trying to find, trying to find who I could talk to, who I could get in front of, So for me, I think that networking piece is key,
Yeah.
because when you do have that right conversation, you want to be ready. So when I had the conversation, I had raised my hand for all these extra special projects at my job. So I had like I said, my Yay Me file, right? I had my MBA already, right? So when I got that luck, that conversation was the luck, right? But I already had done the hard work. I had already prepared myself for the opportunity. So I think networking is key. Did you have any key partnerships or networking that helped you
Yeah.
get into the role?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny that you mentioned that because I think you and I met years ago, not years ago, but when we first met, it was through a networking, event. And we weren't in the same function. We'd never talked to one another before, but I got a lot from that meeting. And funny enough, now we're on the same team. So networking is huge. And I think back on kind of my career so far, and it is because of those maybe not formal conversations, but informal conversations about things I want to do and things that I have on my radar, that have really put the bug in other people's ears too. So when they hear of something, they're like, Christy would be great for that. Or maybe Christy would have some insight into that. So networking is huge, especially it's so easy to do now because we've got LinkedIn, you've got these other social media outlets where there's a lot of different groups, even on like Facebook, where you could just tap into different professionals, learn a little bit from others that are in that arena that have been like living this and breathing it for so many years. Just get the insight. I go there for just some more, acumen on the recruiting role, get some different perspectives that we wouldn't have from internal to my organization. And I think that plays into that networking piece too, because you don't know what you don't know. And until you force yourself to break out of this, I only talk to people I know, you're never going to expand beyond that.
Yeah, that's great. That is true. Like I said, and like you reiterated, is you have to get a little uncomfortable. So, and that
Yeah.
networking piece is key when you're trying to transition into HR. And just some things also I would just say, and maybe a little tough love is you're gonna have to decide what you want to compromise on. If you're getting into a whole new industry, you're gonna have to compromise on some things. For myself, I took a pay cut to come into HR. When I took on this new role, the team that I'm on with Christie, I'm before COVID, I was doing an hour commute each way, because it's something that I really wanted to do. And I have my end goal in mind about who I want to be and what are my career goals, because if you're not going to do it, someone else is going to step in that for that opportunity for you. So you really have to decide, what are you willing to sacrifice? For me at the time, I was sacrificing, when I was in retail, sacrificing my work-life balance. I was sacrificing time with my family. And I was like, hey, that's not where I want to sacrifice. But I can't sacrifice a little bit on the pay. Like I said, I can't sacrifice, a little bit of ego, stepping back to step forward. Not a problem. I've learned so much about being a better boss now from being an employee. So I think it was all design and it's going the way it's supposed to be. So that would be my insight, is really decide, make that list. And if you really want it, are you going to have to relocate? Are you going to have to do an hour commute? Are you going to have to take a little pay cut and maybe not have, 200 or 100 direct reports anymore? How is that going to look for you, and really decide, how bad do you want it? Are you going to have to invest in yourself and some money and some time to get an additional certification to really learn? Are you going to have to get uncomfortable out there on LinkedIn and kind of, like I said, have no shame out there saying, hey, I need a job in HR, who do you know? So that's my final insight. Do you have any final thoughts, Christy?
No, I think you've hit the nail on the head on so many different things. I really think that it's good to express that, being uncomfortable, and thinking about the things that you would want to sacrifice in order to move forward, and just being really honest with yourself, because sometimes we have these great ideas, but at the end of the day, it's like, what am I going to have to do to make that happen? And then making sure that it's realistic for you. But getting into HR is not super hard. It is a bit of a challenge. I think sometimes if you don't have the right experiences, one thing I was going to mention is there's always opportunities to volunteer at nonprofits and HR related roles, and then get some experience that way. If you can't get the role as a paid employee, start by giving back to the community and get involved in those nonprofits to get that experience you can add to your resume. And you can use those examples too in your interviews as well. I think that would be what I would have to share, Alaina.
That's awesome. That's good. That does remind me of an experience I did when I was out there begging to talk to people. I have a family. My family is comprised of a lot of entrepreneurs, and then their networks with other entrepreneurs. So I did do some recruiting and hiring, kind of on a small contract basis, to really work on those recruiting skills. So I had those experiences to lean on. So what you said about nonprofits and doing work that you might not get paid for, but to get the experience, that's great insight. So yeah, so that, I'm sorry we mixed it up for you guys today, but this is a topic that you brought to us and we wanted to make sure that we addressed it right away. So transitioning to HR is possible. Get your plan in place, and feel free to reach out to Christy or myself if you have more questions about our personal journey and how we transition to HR. And next week, we promise we are going to bring resume hacks and tips. That's what we're going to talk about next week. So tune in next Tuesday. And per usual, if you have any questions, comments, or any other ideas that you would like to bring to the talent table, keep them coming. And we appreciate you tuning in. All right. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.